Yes, welcome back. This is A RAP CRITIC. It's your boy Malik-16 with my special guest. And no, Mama didn't have to tell us not to sell work because we just weren't about that life, even though we grew up in the hood. So, Mama for me, Grandma for him. Shout out to everybody who wished Nephew a happy birthday from our last episode. Yes, it is that time of the year, and that's why he's here. I'm gonna let him reintroduce himself. Tell him who you be, Nephew.
What's good, y'all? I'm Ramel. I'm his nephew. Today we're gonna be reviewing another album. This is the second category. Let's get it.
And we're talking about Culture by the Migos, released in 2017. If you have not already, take a moment to like and subscribe. I hope you've all gone to the rapruler.com by now, signed up, and do the whole shebang. I'll be back with the I Used to Love Her scale shirts in the next episode. But we took a break to represent for the family. As you see, the father, son, seafood, the steak and take. I wish that restaurant was still around, but memories. Let's jump into it with no further ado. This is category 2, as my nephew pointed out, and we're going into the rap performance on this album, Culture. First dimension that we talk about is dimension 1, personality and charisma. Ramel, how much personality and charisma did the Migos give us on this album?
They give, how can I say it? A lot of their personalities in different ways, like with the ad-libs.
In the episode before this album, we were going over the sophomore album by Wu-Tang Clan. And Wu-Tang is one of those groups that back in their era, if you weren't a fan, if you were just a casual listener, you'd be like, well, I don't know which switch, and you only knew the famous ones. And I think Migos had the same effect, where if you were not someone who listens to Migos, you can't tell them apart. Fans know them right away. On this album, as you listen, you start hearing the subtle differences in how they approach things. So some of it is vocally, it's the choices they make in their verses that let you know who they are. I think though, you have to be a fan. Migos do not rap from a point where their personalities are evident right away. And even outside of rap, they're kind of notorious at this point for not being people that like interviews and not being that great at interviews. And they rap in similar style. What'd you say?
I don't really think that's kind of true, because if you listen to a Migos song, you can instantly, oh yeah, that's Quavo. Oh yeah, that's Takeoff. Oh yeah, I know that's Offset. You can tell by like the way they rap and how their voice sounds.
But you represent what I was talking about. You're someone who knows and listens to them. Can you tell which members of Wu-Tang you're listening to if I put on a Wu-Tang song? Now you can, because you watched the show. But if I did before, you'd be like, which one is this? And real fans are like, they sound nothing. I'm like, how could you mistake Master Killer for Ghostface Killer? But before you saw the show, you'd be like, which one? Which killer is that? So I don't think they do anything in their verses to show you the differences in their personality unless you're really paying attention. And we're going to talk more about that in the wordplay section, because they all play different roles. Keep in mind, they're all around the same ages, and they are viewing things differently, but all coming together for the same point, which, like Ramel pointed out in video 1, it's big money talk. They're not the easiest, if you're not already familiar with who they are, to pick up on personality, because they're also talking about the same thing. So what do you give this on the scale from 1 to 5 with personality and charisma?
4.
4, okay. Why not 5?
Because they show it, but to a certain extent, because there is times where they all do sound the same, whether it's in their verses or tone.
Right. Whereas you compare them to other rappers, J. Cole, you're going to hear his personality right away. Sometimes J. Cole's voice cracks while he's rapping because he's so passionate about what he's saying. You know what I mean? And then again, I talked about this on the Born Sinner review. J. Cole talks in between. He's like, oh my God. And, he'll do things to let you see who he is. They're not doing it. Everything is recitation. They're like, bottles on bottles on bottles. They're not giving you that time to like get to know who they are. They want you to know their style, not them. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats takes us to dimension 2. The question of suspension of disbelief or believability. This is not an album that's asking you to suspend your disbelief of who they are saying they are. They're telling you, we are these people and this is what we do. So we can factor that out. Now the question always comes down to this one thing. How much do you believe the Migos? How much do they make you believe them on this album?
I mean, most of the album, they're really just trying to tell you, hey, we are rich now, we are up. The things that we talk about, we own, we have. And I believe them 100% because they're telling us about, you know, how much money they have, Lambos, like you said, paddocks, diamonds, chains, you know. They really just telling us that they made it out.
Now, we established that a lot of rappers this year that this album came out started to talk about the same thing. Why is it so easy to believe the Migos over all those other rappers? Because Black Youngster was out the same year. Rich the Kid was out the same year. Why is it so easy to believe them?
I don't know how to say it. Like, this wasn't their blow up album compared to like Black Youngster and them, because they just had came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
At this time. Yeah, Migos have been around. So yeah, that's why I say they're more believable.
Right. Now, like I do often on this channel, I try to assess it from a logic standpoint. Now, we're talking about rappers who started out in their teens. Let's also factor in that Migos are not from Atlanta proper. Now,
Uncle Malik, before you get on, sure you want to do this? You sure you want to, like, oh, he's not from, they're not from, so you want to do that? Because that's equivalent to saying Wu-Tang is not from New York, they're from Staten Island.
I'm not saying it, I'm saying what's been said.
But you know how some people take it.
Yeah, of course I know. I mean, it comes with the territory. So,
I understand.
I gotta point out logic and the idea that, you know, it's been noted, especially we'll talk about this year recently on songs like Amaretta's Not Atlanta, where they were famously calling out all these rappers who've been claiming Atlanta proper that are not from the city itself, and sparked all of these Southern conversations and debates about who's really repping where they're from. It's wide information that Migos are actually from Gwinnett County. They're from a different part of Georgia, right outside, which is considered the suburbs of Atlanta, right? And so they have a way all throughout this album of saying they're from North Atlanta, North, from the north, that way. But if you also factor in that they started their hip-hop careers while they're teens, they're all really fairly young. The question of believability is always going to be a tricky one, just like what happens with a lot of rappers and their products that we bring up when we get to this particular dimension. How much do you believe it given those facts that you know outside of their performance, right? So all throughout this album, as much as Ramel keeps pointing out that they're talking about money, as often as they're talking about money, they're talking about slinging drugs. But the question is always, how good of a job do they do believing you? For the 13 tracks that they have, do they take you into a place where you believe that, yes, they were in the bando, chopping up work, 17.5, same color t-shirt, getting it out the mud, getting it how they live, and now they're able to enjoy all the spoils and the richness from doing that. One thing that happens where we talk about the distinction of their personalities, if you notice, Takeoff does the most drug talk. Offset does the most money and women talk and violence talk, but more when he talks about women, he talks more about taking someone else's woman. Quavo talks about like having a woman over for the night, like just getting with different women, and he'll talk about hustling in a past tense. Takeoff tends to talk about hustling like he's about to do it now. Cut up the work. Quavo's like, I used to do this, you know, he'll say it in a lot of past tense context. Offset almost never talks about the drug part. He has a couple lines throughout this entire album. He chop up the brick with an axe. but he talks a lot about killing competition. I will shoot you. I got this gun, this model gun. This is how I'll shoot you. You know, your wife and your mother might be home. You know, he'll say crazy, volatile stuff, but most of his time is spent talking about the money and taking other people's women. And so Quavo stays away from the violence more than Takeoff. And Offset, he tends to floss more and talk about just having different women over. And again, hustling is in the past context. Takeoff spends the most time talking about doing the drug dealing. So the question is, how much do you believe the Migos? Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Ramel, what are you giving this on a scale from 1 to 5?
A 5. Out of that, 5, yeah.
Okay. Are you saying that because you're scared of the backlash? You don't want people in the comments talking about he's a hater, he don't know them?
I mean, I'm not. It's because, you know, when somebody talks about it a lot, you gotta like, oh, so he's probably not kidding at this point. Because remember, well, now I think this is a song where they started transitioning more to talking about money and not, you know, the bando and stuff, because their old tracks is like that. Like you could hear them Culture 2, Culture 3, they're talking about more money things now. Richard.
So got you. So as someone who's been listening to them from early on, you've seen the growth. It's gone from Hannah Montana to more songs like Big on Big and Slippery.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay. That takes us to dimension 3, the delivery and the use of voice. You started touching on this when we were talking about their personalities. One thing that Migos is famous for is their ad-libs. Atlanta rappers have been killing the game since the 2000s with how they interject ad-libs, since people love Jeezy's "That's Right," you know. And maybe this is Coach K's influence. Coach K being Jeezy's former manager and now being the person bringing this album to the forefront under his quality control label. Maybe he was telling them, hey, y'all gotta have like a hook, a thing that catches y'all. We talked in the first video about how on Bad and Bougie, each verse had its own lead-in. You know, Offset comes in with his whoop, 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 whoop before he even says a word. And then Uzi Vert is doing his yeah, right? And Quavo comes in with, he doesn't do sound effects, but he starts on that bounce stutter part of the beat. So all his words like this. So real creative uses of the voice. Prior to them, you know, the closest we had in reference to this is Jim Jones. On Dipset, Jim Jones would always like repeat words and people would be like, why does he do that? But a lot of people loved him for that. You know what I mean? Like anytime anybody from Dipset is rapping and Jones is doing ad-libs, you're like, we got him. Oys, Broadway, Squale, you know. Migos is doing the different, Migos is doing the Atlanta version of it, but to like the 10th degree. Migos is where we get scoot from, and you know, especially with Travis Scott on the album too, who does that same thing. Someone will be like, these are the trickle.
And it's like, it's no pauses in between. It's da-da-da-da-da, the ad-lib, then the next one, you know, it's no pauses. It's just straight back to back.
Right. This is where we're getting the Migos bread and butter. And so a huge part of why they're brought up in the rap conversation, not just this rock star. I know a lot of the younger rappers are like, don't call me a rapper, call me a rock star. Migos knew that they were rappers. Even though they reached rock star status, they are musicians in the sense that they understand that their voice is the instrument. So we talked about a beat like T-Shirt, where it's so simple of a beat that another rapper would have fumbled that song because it would have been too empty for them. Migos knew what they were doing because they are instruments themselves. They use their voices like the last part of the beat. And so Quavo's decision to be melodic on it, Takeoff's decision to do a whole staccato flow, all of those are choices that someone who's like married to the music has to understand. They don't go off beat. You know, they really understand the tone of all of their voices too. Quavo has the lightest tone, Takeoff has the gruffest tone, and Offset is somewhere between the two of them, and they use it well. Something I think that's interesting that they do, whoever does the hook usually does the first verse. Did you notice that?
For real?
Yeah, so like Takeoff does the Carl Caston hook. He's got the first verse on there. Offset does Bad and Bougie hook. He's got the first verse. And so on and so forth. Quavo does Dead's hook, so he does the first verse. He does Slippery hook, so he does the first verse. So there's not this distinction of voices. Usually, you know, somebody else will do the hook, and then the first voice you hear is a contrast to that. So it'd be like Ramel's doing the hook, and then Malik will be the first voice that y'all hear, and then you'll hear Ramel later. But here they're like, nope, we can give you more of me. And I thought that was an interesting choice. The guest features also don't do any of the hooks.
Yeah, it's just their verse and they're done.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I'm only paying you for a verse. And most people, when they get somebody featured, they're like, come on, do this hook, add your flavor on that. Migos like, we got this.
That's because they don't really need it.
Yeah.
Already good enough. We have your verse, your hooks. We don't need another person.
They let Travis Scott, he's the most collaborative on this album. Like, he's on that hook with Quavo for Kelly Price, and it works well. Like I said, it adds a different feel. Maybe they should have done more of that, but within themselves as a group, as a self-contained 3-man group, they use their voices like second nature. You can tell they're family because they can finish each other's ad-libs, and you know, they're very animated too. Nobody's too cool to do sound effects. Everybody does sound effects. Everybody does like melodious stuff. Everybody plays with cadences. They all take turns doing different things. And that's group work right there. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Ramel, what you giving this for delivery and use of voice?
A 4.
A 4? Why not 5?
Just to be safe with a 4, but you know, they did good with delivering and voice. You know, it's Migos. They always got their good ad-libs and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, ad-libs were game-changing. So that takes us to dimension 4, everyone's favorite, the flow. This is the other place where Migos shine. They're flow masters, man. Like, that can't be taken away.
I like Takeoff's flow on T-shirt.
Which is,
yeah, woke Kibo Sabi. Like, I like how he chopped it up in between.
He chopped it up for that entire verse, right? He didn't switch it at all. He let that whole verse rhyme with that style, and I think most of them do the whole song that way. I think Offset's the only one who didn't do that flow, because even the hook has that style. Like, Mama told me, almost like you're talking in a fan.
It was Quavo did it, but to a certain extent, because after that is 17 Father same color T-shirt, because he started speaking regularly too at the same time.
But even his decision on that hook to do that, Mama, she told you, with the auto tune, like, yeah, man. People argue that Takeoff is the best, and I don't know if that conversation comes from people paying attention to his flow or his content, like what he's saying. But why do you say that?
He's the best because he has good bars from all the songs from all the albums I've listened to, all the songs, how the way that he enters, that he comes on the song. So, you know, he got that deep voice too. Like, what's the song I was listening to earlier? I saw emoji chain. You know, his verse especially last, but it was great.
Great. Interesting. None of them slack in the flow department. I'd say Offset and Takeoff have more to prove when it comes to flow. Quavo tends to be more laid back, and so you'll hear more continuous flow patterns from Takeoff and Offset. But it sounds like Offset does a cleaner version of the triplet flow. When he decides to do it, he goes really smooth and clean out. And Offset will switch his flow more than anyone else. Quavo uses a little bit of cheating because Quavo doesn't switch his flow so much. He switches into sing-songiness. So he doesn't switch his rap flow a lot. He'll rap for like 8 bars and then start doing something repetitive and singy. But with Offset, you're gonna get like 3 flows in a verse. You know, he might come out like jump on the work at the
I think out of them, Offset would rap the most. Like Takeoff is there because he'll like, all right, I'm gonna just give you this bar, I'm gonna give you this verse, you take it. But Offset on the hand, he's gonna give you 3 different kinds.
Yeah.
And you know,
Yeah, you're right.
Quavo's gonna give you a verse, but he's gonna sing most of it.
Yeah. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about flow. I think Takeoff might be he's the anchor. He has the most steady flow, but he does take a back seat on a lot of songs. You know, famously, the conversation of him not being on Bad and Bougie, the infamous interview where academics asked him, hey, it sounds like you were left off of Bad and Bougie. And he said, do I look like I was left off Bad and Bougie?
Yeah.
And Joe Budden, and they all get ready to fight. But, you know, they may have reacted like that, but a lot of people were saying, hey, they didn't put this guy on the song. They let Uzi Vert come on. And we talk about this song being the song that people play all the way through. That seems like a missed opportunity for Takeoff, especially if people are saying he's the best. But flow-wise, they all stay in pocket. They know exactly where they're gonna land, how they're gonna land, and what roles they're gonna play. Sometimes one leads off, sometimes one ends it. They all take turns, and I think, you know, that's the musicianship to them. So I mentioned the pause flow in video 1. The way that Migos goes about the pause flow on this album is different than how everybody else was doing it, because it wasn't this pregnant pause with emphasis on dramatic effect where they're like, Instead, what they do is just kind of tack the word connected to the sentence at the end of the sentence. So, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And whatever that ending word is in reference to what the sentence has set up. So that's their version of the pause flow. Yeah, I'll put up some examples. What we get here, we get that staccato flow a lot, which Soulja Boy made popular. That whoa, kimo, sabe, that choppy. And then of course you do get the triplet flow, but even in songs, they're not really abusing it. I don't think there's any songs on here where they're all using the triplet flow for each verse. If 2 of them do it, one of them is gonna rap a different way. So there's a mastery of flow. You're hearing different flows all throughout the album. So if people take away anything, they can't take away the musicianship of Migos, knowing how they want to function as a group and knowing how to rap. They can rap. And it's evident. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Ramel, what are you giving this for flow?
5.
5. Yeah. All right, that takes us to dimension 5, the question of wordplay and bar intent. Now, talking about the differences between the 3 of them, it becomes evident that Quavo is more inclined to do clever things with words. Offset is more concerned with how slick he's talking, but Quavo seems less concerned if you get it or not. He just wants to deliver it. And if you read these lyrics, you can see that Quavo thinks more wordplay based. So he'll say something like, that's the only way to plot. Clay Tomp, corner shot. White boys in the gang call him Andy Milonakis. What do you say also? I F the game, Kama Sutra. That's the pause flow right there. Quavo's not setting up his verses in a way where he cares if you catch them or not. You gotta listen, you gotta be a fan, or you gotta read them, and then you'll catch it. But you'll see line for line, that whole verse from Quavo is full of clever couplets like that, to the point where it's like each line has some clever thought in it. None of these are like, oh my gosh, lyrics. But after hearing that Clay Tomp line and that Andy Milonakis line, you see that he had like 4 of these lines back to back. It's like, oh, Quavo was thinking. You know, he was being slick all through this. Offset is more concerned about the description, and so is Takeoff. Takeoff is more direct. The closest you get to wordplay from Takeoff is when he said, how many chickens you can get in whichever way, the trap turn to Zaxby's. Anybody who's ever been to Atlanta or lived in Atlanta like me knows Zaxby's one of like the most poppin' chicken spots in Atlanta. It's just a common fast food chicken spot out there. So saying you got chickens and you can get them however you want, the trap turn to Zaxby's. That's the pinnacle of Takeoff getting clever like that. Quavo seems to do it more, but Quavo's not going to do it that obvious. If Quavo did that line, Quavo will be like, got chickens in the trap, Zaxby's. He's not giving you a lot of time to set it up. He's just like, hey, here's my clever line.
I mean, well, I don't really got nothing for this category. When I listen to the Migos, I don't really listen for like wordplay-ish in a way, because I already know they don't do a lot of it. So I'm listening for the flow, ad-lib, the beat, stuff like that.
And it could be argued that's what most people listen for, but these guys are rappers, so if you pay attention, you'll notice that there was some effort made, and that's why this is done at the end of the day. It's like, oh, see my effort. I think they know that. I think they know that people may not be like reading their lyrics with a magnifying glass, and so that's why it's there, but it's not emphasized. I think Offset has become more like that after this album. Offset cares more about clever lines, which we'll go into in the next dimension, but this is all something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. There's simile, not a lot of metaphor, but the pause flow creates metaphor situations, and there's lots of imagery. What are you giving this on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats?
A 3.
A 3. All right, next dimension is punchlines and poetic wisdom. So I imagine punchlines are also not something that you're expecting from Migos.
Yeah, I don't really expect a punchline.
Right.
Like that.
Okay. Again, Quavo, if you're going to get punchlines from anybody, it's going to be Quavo. Throughout the album, you're going to get more of that in sprinkles. He has some Simply Lemonade punchlines. I think he does that, maybe once or twice. And these are the reasons why I'd imagine fans of Migos, really emphasize, no, they could spit, because you can tell they're not just getting up and saying anything. Even though they're staying in a very narrow and limited box, how they approach it is where there was some thought put in to be clever and slick. Of course, their guest features like 2 Chainz. 2 Chainz is going to come with punchlines. You already know that. He said 2 Chainz has a line, something like, I pull up with a bunch of singles, you know what I was doing last night. Fully automatic, and it don't stutter, cute things like that. But you're mostly going to get punchlines from someone you expect to hear punchlines from. Gucci Mane, Lil Uzi Vert, Travis Scott, they're not doing that. But 2 Chainz is more of a punchline rapper. And within Migos, if you're getting it from anyone, it's Quavo. You get it from Takeoff and Offset here and there, but it's Quavo in this really nonchalant way. Now, poetic wisdom. Do you hear any poetic wisdom on here? Are they giving you like quotes that you can post up or words to live by?
Let's see, every song.
Have you ever seen anybody put up a meme with Migos lyrics?
Except for that one Bad and Bougie line, really nothing. Really,
Yeah.
It's really nothing. Yeah, it's not really. It's not like a Drake or a J. Cole song or a Kendrick where, ooh, yeah, let me for my next Instagram picture, let me get that captured.
Yeah, so, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. What you giving this?
2.
There we go. Dimension 7 concepts. Are there any concepts on this album?
No.
Yeah. We talked about Big on Big, and then maybe the last song, Out Your Way, where they're like, I want to thank you for going out your way, but they still start flexing.
When I think of concepts, I think of songs like Dr. Carter by Lil Wayne, stuff where he's portraying a doctor. It's
right.
Really a bunch of like them playing a role or playing as somebody. It's just them talking about what they have.
Yeah. Migos are straightforward rappers. They're not challenging any creativity in that. I think they put all their creative muscle into their flows and their delivery, and they don't leave space for anything else on this album where it's like, ooh, that was creative. It's like, nope, we want to give you just what you what you expect. Strip club music, trap music, club music, radio music. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. What you giving this for concepts?
A 1.
Yeah. I knew you were gonna say that too. That's crazy. All right, dimensions dealing with content. That's dimension 8, external content. How much were they talking about outside of themselves? Were they talking about anything about the environment, about the hood, about life, the government, the world?
No.
The closest you get is Out Your Way, you know, where they're thanking the girl. The lens goes on to these women in their lives, but it's not heartfelt. And again, it's not the most focused song. It's not like they're staying on topic. They're still talking about themselves, and it's mostly the hook that talks about. But that's the closest they get to trying to have some content that's not about them. Because even Big on Big, they talk about what they're able to do now, and they're challenging other people. Are you as big as us? Can you say you got that? But which takes us to the internalized content. How much reflection are they doing? How much are they talking about their life and their story?
A lot. Like I said, this was an album of really them talking about, hey, we have money, we can get anything we want. As you can see, talk about our Lambos, diamonds, cars, paddocks, you know, we could buy act, we could buy a whole bunch of drugs. It's a lot of internal. Mostly.
It's internal materialism, but are you really getting like inside the people?
Oh, inside it? No.
Yeah, I left this album not knowing any more about them than I already knew. Like the closest we get is Quavo when he insinuates that this used to be his lifestyle. But the other two are talking like they'll do this right now. You know, there's moments of sparse self-reflection, mostly from Takeoff, who talks about his mother. Quavo, you know, mention his aunties and them encouraging him, and you know, you'll hear it in the ad-libs, mama. But you know, Takeoff told her I was raised by my mama, didn't have a daddy. Or he'll say something like, school wasn't working for me, I chose another route. And they'll mention, you know, like F the police or middle finger to the law. But that's about those little glimpses and glimmers of something is the most substance you get. They don't tell you about the poor times. You know, I think Quavo might say something like, I came from eating a cup of noodles, but that's just the line. You know, you don't get anything. They don't even tell you on Big what they're able to do based on what they weren't able to do before. Like, it'd be different if that was a song where they're like, I used to have to take the bus, now I, you know, no one's telling you that.
It's not like that other J. Cole song where he was talking about how he had to wait outside for Jay-Z to come out, you know, and how he lived in New York, his past, you know, stuff like that.
And, you know, this is not their first album, so I guess they're already rich, they're already famous, they're not going to go all the way that far back to tell you about it. So that's just where you're at with content. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Ramel, what are you giving this for both 8 and 9, external and internal?
1.
1 for both?
Yeah.
All right. Takes us to the final dimension, storytelling. Are there any stories being told on this album?
Let's see. No. Yeah, no. There's really no storytelling. No.
Yeah, there's not. I mean, sometimes Takeoff rhymes in a story format, but he'll go somewhere else. Sometimes Offset talks about what he will do, like, oh, I'll run up in your house and do this, but there's no, like, from point A to point Z, here's our story. The hook sometimes talks about what they're going to do for the night. Some people consider that a weak point. It's a 13-track album. For an album like that to have no story, some purists are going to say it's not a classic because rapping is storytelling. And some people are going to say, oh, you got to listen for the stories. If you have to strain that hard, then is it really a story? So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. What are we giving this for storytelling?
A 1.
A 1. All right, y'all. That concludes our Category 2 review of the 5-year-old classic by Migos, Culture, the first Culture. And I would love to hear your comments either in and on YouTube or on theraproulette.com. Go rank this album. Let us know where it sits in the pantheon of classic albums. Thank you for letting us shine light on the second young classic that we've ever done on this channel with my favorite guest, Nephew. Couldn't have done this without you, Ramel. And this is a big year for you too. So awesome. Thank you for spending time with your uncle, man.
No problem.
All right, y'all. Y'all know what it is. Until next time, F a Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to meth.